I'm particularly pleased to bring up my good buddy Lon Safko.
Wow, yeah, thanks. So good morning and welcome. Holy crud, man, that's a lot of stuff. It's all about innovative thinking. I'm always afraid when people ask me what do I want to do for a living, and I say I teach people how to be innovative thinkers. I teach people how to be creative, because they're really not quite sure what innovative thinking means. But what I found is that innovative thinking truly and honestly adds to your bottom line. It adds to the culture of your company. So this morning what I want to do is I want to actually teach you how to be better thinkers, more creative. And as Steve has shown you, I've done a lot of that in my career. Let's jump right into it here. Again, that's some of the stuff that I've done. The reason that it's in my intro, yeah, please don't try to read it. You'll get a third of the way through and your eyes will start to bleed. But I put it up there because once you become an innovative thinker, you can't stop. It's just so much fun and it becomes easy. It's like riding a bicycle and playing the piano. It just takes a little bit of practice. And the better you get at it, the faster it happens, and then eventually it gets to a point where it just happens all the time and it kind of makes you crazy. But that's what the cool part is breathing that innovation into your company. And this is some of the things that I've accomplished in my career. And then I got to a point where I was like, cool, now I want to teach other people how to do this. And that's what we're going to do here today. We're actually going to teach you how to be an innovative thinker. Now, what I want to talk about first is the distinction between inventor, entrepreneur, intrapreneur, because I know you've heard that definition, these definitions before, but I want you to understand what the real difference is. An inventor creates something new and exciting that's never been seen before. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln not only was an inventor, but he's the only president to receive a United States patent? Most people don't know that. That's because he was an inventor, but he wasn't an entrepreneur. He came up with an incredible idea. He actually saw it through, got his patent, but he never built a company around it or brought the product to market, and that's why you've never heard about it. So there's a huge distinction between an inventor and an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is someone who builds a company or an organization around a really cool idea, but they don't have to come up with the idea. Steve Jobs, I had a chance during the late 80s, early 90s to work with Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs on the first computer to save a human life. And one of the things that I learned about working with Steve Jobs is he is the consummate entrepreneur. He can take ideas, most of the time other people's ideas, but he can bring them to market. He can rally an organization. Steve Jobs, right now, his personal worth is about $3.3 billion. Oh my gosh, now that's an entrepreneur. But you know what? He's never invented a thing a day in his life. Yeah, he surrounds himself with people who are inventors. He's the entrepreneur. Intrapreneur does exactly the same thing, but does it within your organization. And that's the goal of today, is for you to understand the value of innovative thinking and to foster that feeling within your organization to get your inventors, to get your entrepreneurs, your intrapreneurs to develop new ideas and actually bring them to market within your organization. I'm not just talking about R&D and the engineers and the geeks that you're forced to sit in the basement. No, I'm talking about everybody. I'm talking about administrative assistants. Some of the best ideas in some of the companies that I found came from administrative assistants. Sales. I mean, you need creativity in sales. You need it at the C-suite. You need it in the strategic planning. And an innovative company, an innovator, is someone that can do both. And that's something that I've been blessed with throughout my career. And that's what I want to share with you, is how you can come up with new ideas, be creative, invent new things, but more importantly, and here's the most important thing, because every one of us have come up with really good ideas, but what have you done with them? That's the tough part. As Thomas Edison said, that innovation really is 10% inspiration, 90% perspiration. That's what the innovator knows how to do, is to get that 90% perspiration, actually make the world different, make it a better place with these new ideas. We're all creative, every one of us. Just think of how creative kids are. I mean, if anybody ever had a teenager that came in after midnight, you'll know exactly how creative a kid can be. There's reasons that we're not creative is because a lot of it is trained out of us. There's perceptual reasons, stereotyping, saturation, evolutionary image. There's cultural reasons. There's environmental reasons, emotional reasons, and then the most important is conditioning. Once you realize and you understand what the barriers to you being creative are, you can break down those barriers and you can practice and you can become more creative. For example, the last item there, coloring inside the lines. When my granddaughter was 6 years old, she came to Phoenix to spend a week with us a couple of summers ago. And of course, if you have granddaughters, you know that projects are very important, keeping them occupied. And we bought some coloring books, and the granddaughter says, "Hi, could I color a picture especially for you?" And I said, "Yeah, please." Now, my wife at this point starts rolling her eyes because she knows that I'm going to do something weird, because I am. And I said to my granddaughter, I said, "I want you to do this color for me, but I want you to color outside of the lines." Outside of the lines. And she looked at me, but she trusted me. And by this time, my wife, of course, is really rolling her eyes. She's afraid her head's going to catch fire or something. If I had a round room, I'd tell her to go in and sit in the corner and watch what happened. That's the kind of things I do. But I didn't know what the response was going to be. When she handed me back the picture, what she did was took the colors that were supposed to be in each of the shapes in the coloring book and really hard pressed around the outside black line. What happened is that when you hold the picture back, the contrast between the black and the bright color made it almost vibrant. It was the most beautiful coloring I've ever seen a 6-year-old kid ever accomplish. Because I told her not to color within the lines, I specifically instructed her to color outside of the lines, and because she was only 6 years old, she didn't know the difference. That's what happens to us. We've been taught the difference.
This here is another interesting way of looking at the way the right brain and the left brain communicate with one another, and actually how they don't communicate with one another. And as I'm always saying, the left brain handles the analytical, it handles the numbers, it handles telephone numbers, it handles street numbers, it handles directions, things that you consciously think through is handled on the left side. The right side of the brain is for concepts and colors and images and ideas. And between the two of them, that's what keeps us alive. That's what keeps us driving to work and running our automobiles. And this actually was not designed to separate right brain, left brain. It originally was in a optometrist's office to determine color blindness. Color blindness is very high, predominantly in males. And when I was looking at this list, I tried to read this list two different ways. And I'm going to challenge you, and I'm going to give you just a minute or so to actually read this list both ways. Now, the first way that I want you to read this list is completely ignore the color. Don't worry about the color. I want you to simply just go through the list as quickly as you can. Start at the top left, go down through that list, and then go through each of the 3 columns. So you would read yellow, black, purple, orange, etc. Okay, so time yourself. I'm going to give you just a second, a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds just to read through this list. Okay, you ready? Read the list. Okay, so you kind of get the purpose. You're understanding that as you read through this list and you're reading simply the words, you're going through the list relatively fast. I mean, you can read pretty fast. You've learned to read at an early age and you've progressed ever since then. Okay, now here's the other way I want you to read the list. I simply want you to tell me the color. So this, for example, I want you to, as quickly as you can, I want you to say green, yellow, red, black, green, etc. Now read it again on a count of 3, 2, 1, go. Okay. It's difficult, isn't it? It's kind of really hard. And it is hard. And the reason is that colors and images are processed on the right side of the brain. That's kind of the more subconscious area. The left side of the brain had no trouble reading through this list when it was reading the words because it looked at the characters, it looked at the shape of the words, it matched them up, it knew that the first word was yellow and then next was black and purple. That's your left brain. Your left brain very easily communicates to your consciousness, but it's your right brain that has the difficulty because in order to enunciate and to make those images and ideas real, it has to communicate over to the left side of the brain, and that is a little bit of a slower process. So you can see, just by simply reading this optometrist list in two different ways, you can see how quickly your left brain can calculate words and numbers and communicate consciously, while the right side, the right brain, has to deal with colors and images and concepts and ideas and then communicate to the left side. And that's something that we have to be aware of, and that's part of the reason that creativity is just a little bit more difficult to communicate and to enunciate and to bring to realization than it is simply to go through the paces of everyday life.
What is that? Tell me what you see. What else? What do you see? You see the bird, the bat, Batman symbol? And you see the question mark. Generally in an audience, we'll go about 50-50 on this. Somebody says it looks like one of those ninja star deals or a Batman thing. The reason that 50% of us are seeing, it's kind of like that gorilla thing that we saw earlier. The reason that we're seeing the Batman thing, or some of us are actually seeing the question mark, is because our entire lives we've been trained to look for information that is written in black on a white background. Newspapers, magazines, even computer screens. So when we see this, we don't necessarily see the question mark because we've been trained not to. But if this is the solution that we're looking for, we've got to be aware that there's barriers that force us from actually finding where that solution is or even seeing it because it's right there in front of us. We put restrictions on ourselves that stop us from seeing this information. Anybody see any black dots in between the squares? How many are there? See the black dots? Okay, you see the black dots. How many are there? Trick question. There actually are none. There are no black dots. But you see black dots, but there are no black dots. And the reason is that your eye gets sensitive to the white areas, the codes, the rods in your eye, and it takes about a millisecond or so for that chemical to come out of your synapse in your eye and then clear it so that the black disappears. The point of this particular slide is that, again, when you're looking for answers, when you're looking for solutions, sometimes it's not what you see, it's what you don't see. And sometimes you actually see things that really aren't there. How many legs does the elephant have? The answer is 2. Many. Yeah, too many. And I use this because if I just showed you the picture of the slide and simply went on to the next slide, you would say, oh, picture of an elephant, that's cool, he's lost his mind, whatever. Because we stereotype. As soon as we see the image of the elephant, our mind automatically says elephant, and it stops processing information. That's why we can't solve things, because stereotyping has forced us to look at something, identify it, and not look at it any further. That's what innovative thinking is to take it that next step. Is this possible? We've all seen that. Who's the famous artist that made this? MC Escher, not MC Hammer, MC Escher. Yeah. Yeah, and the reason that those things are so fascinating is because they look almost real, but you really got to study them to be sure that they're not real, that they're actually physically impossible. Again, innovative thinking and conditioning. Volunteer. I just need somebody to read the first couple of sentences of that. Would you please?
I believe that I could actually understand what I was reading. The phenomenal power of the human mind, according to research at Cambridge University, it doesn't matter what order the letters are written in. The only important thing is that the first and the last letters are in the first place. The rest can be totally missed, and you can still read if it wouldn't be.
Okay, I'll take you off the hook. Excellent. That was great. That was really good. Look at this. Wait a minute. Haven't we been told that spelling and grammar is absolutely critical? Now, could we mess this thing up anymore, but you had absolutely no trouble reading it? It's because of the way the mind processes information. When you understand how your mind looks at and processes information, you become really quick at innovative thinking, at inventing. Okay, there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can do it the Thomas Edison way. Thomas Edison was very famous. He was very prolific. 1,198 patents to his name. That's pretty slick. You know what, but here's his famous quote, I haven't failed, I just found 10,000 ways not to create a light bulb. How many people have tried 10,000 ways to solve a problem and still not be able to solve it? Okay, so I'm not really in that school of thought. I'm more about the intellectual part of innovation. And I'm about inspiration. Inspiration is that moment. When I was asked in a newspaper article one time, somebody says, what does it feel like when you come up with this incredible new idea? And I told them, it's remembering the future. It's never happened, but I remember it. It's that same feeling that when you remember somebody's name or telephone number, that little inspiration. Well, the thing that's interesting about it is the word inspiration comes from Greek and Latin origins, inspiritu. Inspiritu means inspirited. What the Greeks believed, Archimedes, when he yelled that moment of eureka, what they believed is that very moment, that gift of inspiration came to you, that it was given to you by the gods. That God touched you. They inspirited you with that information. And that's where the word inspiration comes from, even to this day. So the trick is to get in the mindset of being inspirited.
And here's what I believe is a really wonderful example of what really inspiration is. And we're all familiar with Michelangelo's David. It really is a masterpiece. It's considered one of the finest sculpture ever to ever be created that represents the human body. And when Michelangelo was asked how he created this masterpiece, David, his answer was so elegant. And that's why I wanted to give you that example here today. Here it comes. I simply chipped away everything that wasn't David. Now think about that for a minute. He started with a solid block of marble, and it was a gigantic, huge hunk of marble. And in his head, in his mind, three-dimensionally, he saw the image of David inside that block, and he just simply chipped away everything that wasn't David. And this is also another really great example of when you're looking for a solution, you need to chip away everything that isn't David. If you can go through a process of elimination and simply eliminate everything that isn't part of the solution, what's left is the solution itself. Isn't that elegant?
Innovation. Now, Steve Gardner, a wonderful guy, asked me in 2001, can you please put your entire world's work, your life's work, into a formula so that you can share it with lots of other people, and we'll book you because you will make them rich. And I said, okay, yeah, not a problem. I've innovated my entire career. Let me give you a call about the middle of next week. 3 years later, I just did it instinctually. I never thought about whether there was a process. There actually is. And these are the 3 C's.
Now here's the most important part of this innovative thinking. This is the actual process. And as I mentioned earlier, it took years and years for me to figure out the process that I go through really on a daily basis, coming up with new ideas, new concepts, staying ahead of the curve. And when I finally came to this revelation that really it falls into these 3 simple steps, that's when I got excited and realized that I can then share these simple steps with everybody so that they can actually become a more innovative thinker, more creative. So let's take a look at these. There's collect, calculate, and communicate. And those really are only the 3 only steps that you need. Now, in collect, we're going to look at each one of these kind of individually. In collect, I talk about something called the 5 W's. Are you familiar? Remember the 5 W's from 6th grade English class? The who, what, where, when, why, and how. Well, it's 5 W's and an H. And by the way, do you know where that came from? That came from the late 1800s when cub reporters were going out reporting for newspapers. They had this simple rule. The more seasoned people, the editors said, if you can answer the 5 W's and the H, you can then come back to the office. If you have answered those 5 W's, you have all the information that you need to write a complete story. And they teach that in English. And I want you to use that as well. And we'll talk about how we're going to do that. The second part is calculate. Now, unfortunately, the calculation will kind of run its own course. It's going to take whatever time it needs to assimilate all of this information into a creative solution. And there's not a lot you can do, but the one thing that's really cool about this is that the more you practice these 3 steps, the shorter this calculation time becomes, and you get your answers. You get this creativity happens almost sometimes spontaneously. And then the last part is to communicate, and I call that the stop, look, and listen to communicate creativity. And we're going to talk about how that works here right now too. But really, it's just these 3 simple steps. So let's take a look at what the first step is. remember from that color experiment that there was that left brain, right brain, and left brain handles the daily processes and the text and the numbers and balance in the checkbook, and the right brain does a lot of the subconscious things like drives you to work, rides a bicycle, it handles colors and images and concepts, and the two of them have to communicate back and forth. Absolutely. Well, one of the things that you have to realize in this innovative process is this ability to collect data, to collect information: who, what, where, why, when, and of course the how. And what I mean by this is that you need to completely understand what you're trying to solve. Now, this may be coming up with a new idea, maybe solving an old idea, maybe coming up with a new idea for an old idea, how to apply maybe a different market to an existing product. It could be a positive solution, it could be a negative solution. But what we're really talking about is being aware of all of the possible information that could become part of that solution. Now, let me give you an example. If let's suppose you're thinking about buying a new car and you haven't really decided, and then all of a sudden you decide on a particular model, make, year, and possibly even color. Now, I know it's happened to you if you've ever thought about buying a car. Tell me, is this not true? All of a sudden, when you decided what kind of car you want, you're driving down the road and those cars are everywhere. You're starting to notice them everywhere. There's two of them in your neighborhood. There's a couple of them in the parking lot at work. You're seeing them coming and going on the freeway. And the reason is that when you consciously looked at all of the information about that particular make, model, brand, whatever, then you became aware of that information, and then you started seeing those different cars. And that's kind of one of the weird things too, is that when we do that, now that kind of justifies that decision in our own brains, because now we're seeing that other people have made similar decisions. So if it was right for them, it's probably right for us. I should go buy that new car. And the same thing can happen with a purse or a dress or a set of golf clubs. When you become aware of the details and your consciousness can now focus on that, at that point you start to see it everywhere. And that's what I want you to do with this. I want you to think about everything that there is to know about your problem or about your issue or about what you're trying to create. And if you answer these questions: who is involved with it? Who does it affect? Who is going to use it? Who has created something similar? Who has possibly talked about it? Every way that you can answer that who question for this data collection, I want you to write that down. Sketch it down on a yellow pad, put it into a word processing document. Just answer that question in every way you possibly can. The next thing is what? What is it? What are we talking about? What are the parts? What is something similar? What are you doing when you use it? Every way you can add the word what into a sentence, I want you to do that and answer those sentences, because all of these sentences are going to end in question marks. So I want you to answer them so that now you're looking at it from all these different perspectives. I want you to go through the same thing with the where. Where do people use it? Where would I use it? Where have I seen something like this before? Where might I look to find something like this now? Every way that you can do the where. Do the why, do the when, and do the how. What happens is that when you get into this level of detail and you start collecting different perspectives about where those answers might reside, then you're going to get first of all, a much broader picture of where that solution might be hidden. And it's going to do similarly what we just talked about with the car. It's going to make you very, very aware, so that as you go through the course of the day, you're going to hear things on television. You're going to read things and pick them out of newspaper articles or magazine articles. You're going to hear other people talking about them. You're going to see something on the internet. So the most important thing is to really drill down with these 5 W's. Okay? Now, let's take a look at where you can find this information. As I said, you can look in magazines and newspaper articles and trade journals, but the best place I find is on the internet. Just do random keyword searches. Pick out a particular word that you think might describe your problem, your solution, something to do with the way you would define what you're trying to resolve, and just freeform. Go into Google and just freeform it. Type in 1, 2, or 3 keyword phrases. See what comes up. Look at some web pages. See what the web pages have to say. It's kind of like when you do an image search. You'll type in the word for the image, and then you'll see an image and you'll say, wait a minute, that makes me think of a different word, a synonym. So when you're going through these web pages, think of synonyms for each of the words. Write down all the different words you think that this best describes your problem, your solution, what you're working on, and then go back in and look at synonyms for each of those. Put those back into Google. You know what? Spend an hour. What do you got to lose? Spend an hour. Take a look at everything that's on the internet, even if it has nothing to do with what your solution, your problem, your industry is. And the funny thing is that you will find solutions more readily in industries other than your own. Now, let me give you an example for that. That's a really important statement. If there was a solution for what you were looking for in your industry, you would have heard about it. Someone would have come up with that solution. You would have already known that that solution existed because it's in your industry and that's where you practice. But that's not what we're talking about here. There is no solution. You've got to find that solution someplace else. So don't look in your own trade journals. Don't look on your association websites. I want you to go outside. Now, let me give you a practical example of that. Henry Ford. What was Henry Ford famous for? What did Henry Ford create? Okay, it was the Model T. That's absolutely correct. But go drill down a little deeper. What was he most famous for that revolutionized manufacturing? You got it. Yes, the assembly line. It was the assembly line. Up until that point, everything was manufactured in this process. It would be sitting on a table, and an engineer would come over and work on it, and then a different engineer would come over and work on it, and then another one, and there would be multiple tables. And in the car industry, which is a very complicated machining and manufacturing process, that took a lot of time, and you had to have these multiple tables all over the place, and the engineers would have to move from station to station carrying all of their tools. So Henry Ford, of course, came up with the assembly line where the car actually moved down a line mechanically, and the engineers stayed in place with their tools, the assemblers, and it went significantly faster, which is why he was able to create the Model T Ford, and he created millions of them. And the one sentence statement that he made, I love when he was selling the Model T, is that the Model T, of course, is a wonderful car, and you can have it in any color you wish, providing that it's black. And that was his secret to success. So where did he come up with this idea? Did he go to the Oldsmobile brothers? Did he go to Chevrolet? Did he go to the people building Mercedes? There was a lot of small car companies out there, and they'd been out there for 10 years or more, and they were all doing it the same way. No. Here's what happened. This one afternoon, frustrated by the inability to mass produce, he took the afternoon off, and he brought his lunch, and he went out in Michigan, and he sat on a potato farm under a tree, and he ate his lunch. And he was watching the potatoes going up the conveyor belt from the ground into the back of the truck, and he thought, wow, what if those potatoes were actually cars? And okay, so you can see where we went. He had this moment of inspiration. Why? Because he was thinking about it. He was thinking about all the who, what, when, wheres, and whys. He was focused on the input of data. And when he saw the potato conveyor belt, and trust me, every automobile manufacturer up until then had seen a potato conveyor belt, but at that moment he was inspired because he was in the right mood, the right frame. He was in the collection process. His calculation process was almost immediately, and his communication process immediately told him that that was going to be the solution. Now, isn't that amazing? Isn't that cool? And that's what I'm saying to you, is go through this process. Now, the second C, unfortunately, it's going to work in its own time. Some solutions I get instantly. I'll do the collection process. The calculation is almost instant, just like the example I gave you with Henry Ford. And sometimes the answer just pops out. And the thing is that's really awesome about when you know you have a really genuine, creative holy moly solution. It's kind of like remembering. Do you know the feeling when you remember someone's telephone number, or you remember someone's name, or you say, what was the name of that movie that so-and-so is in, and you're really trying, and then all of a sudden you get that little tingle of inspiration and it comes to you? That's the way really amazing ideas come. That's the feeling that you get. But unfortunately, your brain has got to now assimilate enough of this information, take enough of this collection of data in, and it's got to start building the pieces. And it will. That's the cool thing about it. It actually will build the pieces. Now, the third C in communication, stop, look, and listen. Well, those are three really important steps. And the reason is this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the right brain comes up with the ideas, puts together the solution, and it can be sitting on this solution, and then it has to then communicate that solution over to the left side of the brain so it can be verbalized, it can be realized, it can be communicated. Kind of like in that color chart again. The right brain comes up with the concept and then communicates it to the left brain. Now, here's kind of part of the problem with our ability to do this. Here comes the question, when do you come up with your best ideas? Now, I know everyone listening to this right now has come up with some really amazing, just great ideas. When does that happen? Okay, yeah, you in the back. Yeah, you. Okay, yeah, in the shower. Absolutely. Well, how come you come up with these great ideas in the shower? Well, the reason is that your left brain is on hold. Your left brain is not running the show at that point. Your left brain's responsibility is to make sure that it keeps you safe and keep you alive. I'll give you an example. You're on the sidewalk. You go to step off the curb. You look over. You see a huge rectangular metal object and it's getting larger. What does your left brain say? Get the heck back on the curb. It's a bus. You're going to get smashed. And you step back on the curb and it saves your life. If the left part of your brain was not taking in all this constant information and basically using up bandwidth, using up your ability to your brain's ability, you probably wouldn't make it through a day. So you have to provide quiet time. Maya Angelou, I love Maya Angelou, and when somebody asked her where she got all of her creative ideas from, she called it piddling time, that she allows herself piddling time, and at these moments of piddling time, she gets these moments of inspiration and creativity. That's pretty cool, and that's what I'm telling you have to do. So back to the shower, you don't have to worry about a bus hitting you in the shower. You don't have to worry about driving your car off the road or falling down the stairs. Your left brain is pretty much coasting. I mean, like pretty much the worst you can do is get soap in your eyes, right? So your right brain then has the ability to start communicating to your left brain because your left brain finally took a break and shut up for a minute. You see where I'm going with this? Okay, now by a show of hands, who else? Where do you come up with your great ideas? You in the front. You. Yeah, exactly. When you're asleep. How many people here have woken up in the middle of the night with just great ideas? My time when I get up with really great ideas is at 2:32 a.m. Every single time it's 2:32. It's really weird. It's not 2:33. It's not 4 o'clock. It's 2:32. It's really weird. And what I've learned to do is to put a pad, a little sticky note pad, and a pen on the nightstand so that I can, when I do get these great ideas, because okay, I could tell by the smile on your faces, yes, that's exactly right. How many people here have woken up in the middle of the night with a really terrific idea or a solution only to fall back asleep, wake up in the morning and it's like, okay, wait a minute, what was that? That was a cure for cancer. No, it was a cure for, no, it was a candy recipe. I don't know. That's exactly right. So I keep one in my car. I keep one on my nightstand. I keep yellow pads all over my office. I mean, that's yellow pads are a big thing for me in innovation because anytime I get an idea, I write it down. The other thing is I take my cell phone and I send myself a text message. I record it verbally and it goes into my email every time I get a good idea. So to stop, look, and listen. Okay, where else? Where else have you gotten really exercise? That's right. I didn't see a lot of hands go up with exercise. Maybe more hands should go up. But yeah, exercising, same thing. Your left brain's on hold. Whatever you're doing is repetitive. You're safe. It doesn't have to protect you. It's not calculating numbers. So your right brain has the ability now in these quiet times, these piddling times, to communicate these thoughts back over to the left side of your brain. Is this making sense? So, and here's one of the things that's absolutely amazing. Teenagers, which generally are pretty creative, they block it out. When my daughter was a teenager, I constantly complained that she had this incessive need for noise. And you know what? Unfortunately, it's not just teenagers. Most adults have a need for noise. And what I mean by that is that you get up in the morning, the first thing you do is you put on the TV, you start watching the news, or you put on the radio, and that runs all the way until you leave the house. Some people even have radios in their shower, waterproof radios. Then what's the first thing you do? You get in the car, you turn on the car, bam, radio's going. Well, do you think that with your left brain processing that incessive yakking of the disc jockeys, or even if you're just listening to your iPod or CDs, that listening to the beat, keeping the beat, playing the words, anticipating the next set of words that are coming up, where you are in the song, what the next song is going to be. Do you think with all that left brain activity that there's any possibility that your right brain is going to be able to communicate ideas? The answer is no, it's not. So here's the challenge, and you got to trust me on this. Please do this. The next time you get up and you go into your car, do me a favor, turn off the radio. The radio is the worst possible thing that you can do that stops creativity. If you're in the car and you're completely quiet, you will drive intuitively. So your left brain has got very little to do because you know how to do this intuitively, like riding a bicycle or playing a piano. Your right brain now will be able to start communicating those ideas. You have to allow for quiet time. You've got to create your own piddling time if you want to communicate those ideas over. And this is the most critical step of all, because this is where we fail. We come home from work, we turn on the television, and we plunk down, and we do that until we fall asleep at night. Well, why do you think the ideas are trying to force themselves out when you're asleep and you're in the shower and you're exercising? Exactly. So you got to do me this favor. I want you to stop, look, and listen. I want you to turn down that background noise and create an environment where your right brain can actually communicate those solutions to your left brain.
I'm going to challenge everybody here. Please, I want you to, after we leave here today, when you drive back home, turn the radio in your car off. I want dead silence for at least 30 minutes. I promise you, you're not going to believe what's going to come into your head. All of the subconscious ideas that you've been storing up are finally going to have the opportunity to speak to your conscious. That's one of the tricks, the piddling time. Now, I'm going to give you a practical example, and I'm going to actually let you solve this. This is my most recent patent. I just started negotiations last Thursday for acquisition of $50 million for this patent. But here's the part that's going to make you crazy. You guys are going to come up with it on your own. I'm just going to ask you the questions. I was asked by the Port of San Diego to come in and take a look at their public image problem a couple of years ago. And they knew they had a public image problem because the citizens of San Diego were throwing eggs at the employees as they went to their cars. And there were 2 senators in Sacramento with a bill to dissolve the organization. Let me just give you a sidebar hint. If your company's employees are getting egged and there's 2 senators with laws being passed to dissolve your company, you got an image problem. So when I came in there, it was a government agency. I said, well, what kind of a staff do I have? None. Well, okay, well, cool. Well, how much of a budget do I have? Absolutely none. Has anybody ever tried to do the impossible with absolutely nothing? So faced with that, I knew that I had to work with the internet, because the internet is always going to give you the greatest rate of return on investment for sales, marketing, public relations, and communications, hands down. So I started with the internet. That, by the way, is what I did to the internet in 90-day increments. Those are percent of increase in traffic. So let's just say it was significant. When I looked at the server reports, I saw the strengths, government, military. Come on, it's San Diego. I mean, geez, 23 miles of shoreline was owned by the port, except for the Navy. So yeah, of course. Sometimes the problem isn't the answer, isn't in what you see, it's what's missing. If we're successful at marketing to those people, I want to subtract that from the overall demographic, and I want to find out who we're not successfully marketing to. In this case, it was kids, families, teachers. So I eventually took over Parks and Recreation. I became the director. I had the Beach Boys come do a free concert. I had Admiral Froman actually doing donuts with an aircraft carrier. That was cool. Nobody came out to see it because they weren't paying attention to us. So it's the kids and the families. One of the things that I learned working side by side with Apple, if you steal the kids, the parents will follow. Now, I mean that metaphorically, of course. And then here's a blank screen. We're going to fill in the blanks. Okay, so we know that we got to work with kids. Now, you guys are going to solve this $50 million patent right now. Kids, okay. What do kids like to do? Play, right? We all agree? Rocket science? No, kids like to play. Okay, what else we got? What do kids like to play with? Toys. Survey says toys. Still no rocket science, right? I'm literally doing this on a Wednesday morning at 10 o'clock on a dry erase board, so help me God. It's this easy. Okay, what was the only marketing medium that I had to work with? Internet. Okay, so survey says internet. So what do I got to do? Kids like to play with things that are tangible. Young kids especially don't have the mindset to do imaginary play for much more than about 20 minutes. They like toys, things that are tangible. Okay, so I know that. What is the only tangible thing attached to a computer that could create something tangible? Printer. Let's see, survey says printer. Okay, so what's the solution? I've got to create a toy that can be distributed over the internet, that can be printed out on the printer the kids are going to go ape over. That's what the dry erase board told me. Our first commercial application was with the United Airlines. I said, what if I could create a specialty advertising product similar to a t-shirt or coffee mug with your marketing message and logo on it, which can change every 15 minutes, which, by the way, you can't do with a t-shirt or a coffee mug. And it'll cross all demographics, men, women, children, rich, poor, whatever. And they're going to actually ask for it, and I'll do the distribution 24/7. And every time I give one of your customers one of your marketing specialty advertising products, you pay me a dime. They said, go ahead, you got our attention. And let me tell you, after the first 30 days, they called me up to renegotiate the deal. That's how successful it was. And then this is what I came up with. Paper models of famous locations, of companies' products, of company services. Three-dimensional advertising. We're in the process right now of tying this into Google Earth, Google AdWords, or Yahoo AdWords, so that when you click on something, that a three-dimensional representation of your product or your service is downloaded, or a famous landmark. You're studying the Alamo, click on it. It downloads 6 pieces of paper, fold it, build it up, and it turns into an architecturally true replica of that famous landmark. We're working with this, there's the United Airlines plane. We just did the Smithsonian Institution, and now we're starting to do all the things in their museum because the Smithsonian and I are tight now. Spirit of St. Louis, Apollo. We did the NBC news van. It's a little washed out here, and I apologize, but in the back of the room, make a mad dash for it. There's free paper models. Take some. Bring them home. If you got kids, if you have grandkids, if you hang out at schoolyards, that's the place to get them. General Motors, we did our 4th contract with General Motors. That's coming up. Ford, that's an actual centerpiece where we raised $5.3 million for the Children's Cancer Fund just by using these paper models. Three-dimensional advertising. Okay, so what does this all mean? What it means is that the innovation that you see here, you guys just did. It's really simple if you know what the rules are, just like anything else. Truly and honestly, you guys can be more innovative. But what we're talking about is bringing this innovation into your company, making your teams more innovative. Because more innovation means better products, better services, better competition. You'll beat your competition. It's just that simple. Plus, motivated, innovative people are exciting. Please email me, lonsafko@lonsafko.com. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for your time today.